In northeast Syria, al-Qaeda-linked extremists are holding around 200 Kurdish civilians hostage. That's according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. The Kurds in the area have long been trying to protect their homes amid heavy fighting between jihadist forces and Syrian government troops. RT's Paul Lear has the details.
More than 200 civilians, and let me stress that we're talking here about innocent men, women and children, are being held hostage by extremists in northeastern Syria. Now, we understand that the hostages are being used as human shields. The Russian Foreign Ministry saying that they're mostly from Kurdish families whose members are fighting extremists in the region. Now, fighting broke out a few days ago between Syrian Kurds and al-Qaeda-linked militants in the towns of Al-Abdiyad and Ras al-Ayn along the Syrian-Turkish border. This is exactly where al-Nusra and other al-Qaeda-affiliated groups have been operating. It looks as if these extremist groups are now literally out of control. There are attempts by the Kurds to form some kind of interim government, while the al-Qaeda affiliates want to form an Islamic state. What the fighting shows is that attempts by al-Qaeda to secure Kurdish support has failed, although there are some Kurdish jihadists. Of course, there are still tensions between the Kurdish groups themselves, but it seems that at least for now, they have found common ground against the extremists. Turkey, of course, is looking on with concern. It's worried that if the Kurds fight al-Qaeda, they will get support from the West. But on the other hand, the Kurds themselves are not keen on the Syrian National Council either, and they have refused to join the Turkish-backed Syrian opposition that has not given them any assurances or promises as to a division of Syria after President Bashar Assad.
Some Western states, including the UK, have so far backtracked in their arms supply to the opposition, voicing concerns about the threat of extremists in Syria. But the Free Syrian Army has admitted it will accept help from anyone, including al-Qaeda. My colleague Bill Dodd spoke to Rebel Army spokesperson Zaki Ma.
The situation in Syria with the opposition is pretty much complicated. You hear on media that there's a lot of divisions within the Free Syrian Army. There are divisions.
Well, let's say, you say it's complicated, there are divisions. Basically, you've been hijacked by radical extremists, by the likes of al-Qaeda.
No, you see, you can't say we've been hijacked by the likes of al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda took the advantage, yes, and they thought, look, if our own brothers are being killed by this tyrant, and the world is doing nothing about it and just sitting back on their backsides and doing nothing, well, we're going to step in. And so the Free Syrian Army are like, anyone who's willing to help us in advance to take on this tyrant, we are willing to accept him, whether he looks like Bin Laden, whether he looks like Hitler.
The UK Prime Minister, he says there's too much extremism on the ground there in Syria. So if extremist groups fighting the government multiply, do you actually fear losing support of your foreign allies?
Because, you know, a Prime Minister of some Western country says there's extremism within the opposition. I mean, it's still not a justifiable reason not to help the moderates.
Meanwhile, Syrian opposition figures are lobbying Paris for advanced weapons, and them will go to the U.S. The Syrian National Coalition has undergone a series of shifts in its leadership, but it still lacks unity. RT's Paul Scott looks at who exactly is fighting President Assad.
While the opposition are united in their desire to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad, that seems to be where their similarity ends. The Syrian National Coalition is the umbrella group recognised internationally as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. But they don't represent all factions opposed to Assad. One group operating out of their control, for example, is the al-Qaeda-linked al-Nusra Front. The coalition say they've hijacked the revolution, while they've been classed by many in the West as a terrorist organisation. Elsewhere, a separate Syrian group affiliated to al-Qaeda helped facilitate a jailbreak in Iraq over the weekend, freeing high-ranking al-Qaeda operatives. Infiltrated by foreign fighters, al-Nusra's agenda seems separate from that of the coalition, and it's even led to infighting. One FSA commander was killed by a rival group, and the FSA feel they could soon be fighting on two fronts. Well, when we use the phrase opposition, exactly who are we talking about? Well, the coalition alone is made up of at least 11 different groups, including the Muslim Brotherhood, who have recently called on the US and the EU to send arms in the battle with Assad, while only offering loose guarantees they won't fall into extremist hands. There's also the coalition of secular and democratic Syrians, the Syrian Democratic People's Party, Supreme Council of the Syrian Revolution, and so it goes on. The disparate nature of the Syrian opposition, combined with the presence of Islamic extremists, means any nation looking to support the rebels are walking a continual tightrope, with very few guarantees that any military support won't backfire and actually encourage the one thing they're trying to fight elsewhere.